There's no choice. My soul scrabbles. Like a litter of dogs that didn't come out right, where they put them in a cage and lower them into the cow pond, and they fight and struggle right up there to get that air to the last minute. That's how people get rid of the dogs, you know, breeders. That's how they do it. There's some sick enjoyment in it, I guess. I don't get any sick enjoyment watching humanity struggle on its knees. And I've prayed before the Maker. Because I'm weak, I'm twisted, I'm bad, I'm full of sin. But I love God, and I love justice, and I love free will. So just let God's Spirit shine through this country and this world and turn this tide of evil. But I don't know if that'll happen. All I know is that the flesh can die. The soul goes on. And this is a test. Life on this planet. And I've seen beyond the New World Order. I've seen beyond all their lies. And I know beyond that is the heavens and the creator of it all. You've got to ask God to come into your heart and transcend that evil. Everyone can feel and see that's halfway awake, the energy level of the planet rising. And we're seeing the enemy uncloak itself on every front. We're finding out who's good and who's bad right now. It is an epic time to be alive. Now, our guest, Joel Skousen, has headed up some of the biggest conservative organizations in the country. He helped lead one of the attempts back in the 80s and 90s to wrest control from the neocons and the rhinos and the cuckold Republicans and the rest of it. His uncle, Cleon Skousen, was mayor of Salt Lake and a big patriot and wrote best-selling New York Times #1 bestsellers about naked communism, the naked capitalists, and the rest of it. How ultra-rich elites funded socialism and communism to have consolidated control. And then, of course, Quigley, decades later, wrote a book basically admitting it all. But Skousen, on his own right, former Marine Corps officer and fighter bomber pilot in the Vietnam era, himself with the World Affairs Brief, has done such a great job, I think it was with his discernment, time and time again, being right about what was happening in the world and trying to gauge what's going forward in the future. But everyone must understand, I don't sit here and get mad at, say, Michael Savage because he's got 400 affiliates and I've got 180 affiliates. Say he's coming on next week, by the way. Because he has goodwill, wants humanity to survive, be successful. I'm not in competition with Rush Limbaugh or Sean Hannity. When I attack Glenn Beck, it's because he has a very special office of deception and of attacking Ron Paul early on, 8 years ago, and of key points, saying good things, but then flipping. And now going and meeting with Zuckerberg and groveling and coming out and saying, I think these are good liberals at Facebook and we need to censor these other conservatives. This is the mainlining of censorship in America. What Matt Drudge was warned about by the other conservative justice that isn't dead yet. So here's what I'm here to tell you. The enemy is moving. Everyone knows that. But so is the Spirit of the Lord. Because when the enemy comes in like a flood, the Spirit of the Lord will lift up a standard against it. I don't sit there and give you Bible verses because I want to manipulate you like Glenn Beck does to your Christian roots. I say it because it comes right out of me because it's the truth. And I don't claim to be some high priest or have all the answers. I simply know my soul's pointed towards God, not towards the devil. But my flesh is pointed at the devil. And that's why I am ashamed of myself. Now, there's a big difference between that and these people that claim you're there to basically follow their every whim and they have the answers. You need to think for yourself and follow your own discernment. But we have a 6% trust rate in the media, in AP polls. We have the system collapsing. A major time of change is upon us. And Joel Skousen is with us for the balance of the hours and come on in the next week for a full hour, maybe longer, and take calls. But I'm not here to attack Glenn Beck. I'm talking about his office. I think we can fairly say he is the Judas goat. He is a prototype of that. And his collapse and now his fawning to Zuckerberg, who they admit put Obama in, is a Bilderberg Group member, CIA run on record, total dark side, and now the #1 contributor to Hillary. And this guy's telling us that we need to bow down to Zuckerberg and internet censorship. It really heralds a key time for everyone. So here's what I'm asking before we go to break in about 5-6 minutes. We'll come back and get into geopolitics and what's happening in Venezuela and other key points that you're covering at worldaffairsbrief.com. But Joel Skousen, where are we in your view historically? Because not just at a news level, in my gut, I just feel the energy level reaching an electric firestorm point, and it only seems to be cascading. Do you think I'm wrong, or where are we historical, and what do all these movements signify, and what does the apparent weakness of the enemy signify? Because I know they're not weak, but still, it's just we're seeing amazing things happen.
Well, Alex, it's good to be with you again. I think my analysis is that we are at a significant turning point that we have never before seen in the history of conservatism in the United States. In other words, the conspiracy of globalism and to denigrate sovereignty and masquerading as both liberals and conservatives, controlling both political parties, has been very, very sophisticated. And ever since I was chairman of the Conservative National Committee in the 1980s during the Reagan administration, I really got discouraged about my inability to wake up conservatives to the fact that these people were lying to you. I was very discouraged that a good portion of the conservative congressmen in the United States had mistresses. I mean,
But you were planting the seeds with others, but take credit for what's now happening today.
Well, I don't know whether I started it or not, but I'll tell you, I really sounded the no compromise warning. I talked about rhino Republicans in name only, how we were being betrayed. And I'll tell you, it's taken 30 years, and all of a sudden, the conservatives have woken up and this anti-establishment fever has just blossomed. And so that's why we're seeing this major media manipulation to actually dampen. They're actually removing the content from the internet so that you don't see the wave of resistance.
We're now seeing Chinese communist level censorship here openly in our face.
Absolutely. And what Glenn Beck did was just unconscionable. To basically pander to Zuckerberg. And this is typical of somebody, in fact, sadly to say, even Donald Trump has a little bit of this weakness. He can be flattered, and if you flatter him, he turns around and ingratiates himself to you and says nice things. The other day, he said wonderful things about Dick Cheney, who's, the Darth Vader.
No, I agree. And he's remember Kissinger. He's starting to do some scary stuff.
Yeah, and so I'm really worried about this. But, Glenn Beck comes from an entertainment background, an alcoholic background. He's basically bending over backwards to gain favor in the establishment.
Well, he was a hardcore liberal celebrating abortion just 15 years ago.
Well, that's right. Now, to his credit, I think Glenn Beck and my uncle W. Cleon Skousen was his mentor. He really did read all his constitutional doctrines, and he converted to Mormon Christianity, but he also absorbed one of the weaknesses of Mormons who are high-profile public officials. They're embarrassed about their refugee background, their persecution background, so they've been bending over backwards trying to please the establishment. And we see this with Glenn Beck. We see this with Orrin Hatch.
But America's background is a refugee background. This is just a repeat of the truth of what's happened in this country.
It is, but what I'm saying is that, Mormons have a particular persecution complex, and they're desperately trying to gain acceptance in the world, and that's a problem politically. Now, I don't mean Mormons like myself who are hardcore conservative constitutionalists who know what's going on, who understand the conspiracy. I'm talking about mainstream conservative Mormons, who basically think they can have it both ways. They can play up to the establishment and say nice things about them and be rewarded, and they are rewarded with good press and big articles in U.S. News and World Report praising the church. But it's a trap, Alex. it's a trap in many.
Well, sure. I mean, you talk about the Catholic Church's background, but clearly now they blackmailed it with a pedophile infiltration, took it over. Now the media doesn't talk about it going on. It's worse than ever. And we've got the Pope openly bad-mouthing Christianity in Europe. I want to talk about it when we come back because, moving away from Glenn Beck and media control, I want to finish, more of that and the SEC wanting to censor the web and just, it's here. Beck was, out there pushing it, but Drudge was told last year by a Supreme Court justice, it's coming in 2016, get ready. It's here, but I want to shift gears into the Pope saying, we don't want to talk about Europe's Christian roots and Jesus was like ISIS. I mean, these are real quotes. It's this uncloaking. Why are they doing it? With Joel Skousen, worldaffairsbrief.com. Straight ahead, I'm Alex Jones of Infowars.com. This is an incredible time to be alive, ladies and gentlemen, and your voice, more than ever, needs to be heard against this world government. I want to give you two examples of victory, and then we're going right back to Joel Skousen. And I give this example all the time because it's one of many, but it's one that everybody knows about and you can confirm for yourself. It's like tens of thousands of secret tests, hundreds of them, lethal, thousands killed. Everybody knows about Tuskegee and the government, helping inject and spread syphilis for 40-something years in black people. Super evil. It's a eugenics experiment. So I use that example as something evil because folks know about it. It's the tip of the iceberg. What about 30 years ago, you couldn't find organic food anywhere? But as people created the market, now it's displacing the toxic food and taking over. You took action. And that's why they want to get rid of the free market, is because they know with our choices, we can circumvent all their propaganda if we just wake up to the trance. Wake up to the fact that we're not being sold these ideas for our best interest. And it's the same thing with what we see with internet censorship. If we get upset about it and say it's wrong, they're not going to get away with it. Just like with the Second Amendment. People know the facts. They know the statistics. They know the history. They don't believe a word out of the system. They know there's a formula to get our guns. So it's one of the few places we're having a victory. Just like statistically, we're winning the abortion fight because the facts are on our side. And because we know the enemy is lying. We don't compromise. Well, it's the same thing on politics. They tell us compromise all day long, but they're not compromising with us. Because they have a will to dominate and control. They want dumb slaves. They don't want free will. Oh, the whole popular culture sells the idea that the devil's going to give you all this freedom. The devil turns you into a slave. Whether you believe the devil or not, that archetype. And so if we're no compromise with Agenda 21 and everything they're doing, it's game over. When we realize it's bad. It doesn't help us. It's evil. Now, going back to Joel Skousen, our guest. Joel, you were finishing up with like you said, I meant to say that when I came on today, I was driving here and I thought, this is Chinese-style censorship. It's begun. They're doing it. We get censored, sometimes suspended for 3 days, saying, do this again, you'll be banned. We put it out, and no one even thinks it's a big deal. Screenshots of Facebook saying, we're going to ban you if you, expose Benghazi. It's not pornography. It's not racist stuff. It's nothing. Again, Europe arresting Germans that criticize open borders. France, indicting Marie Le Pen for saying Islam's a greater threat, or as great a threat as the Nazis to our sovereignty. Well, it's true. So you see that this group is allied with anything evil, even though it undermines their own temporal power. The Pope coming out, calling for world government, bad-mouthing Christianity in a major Catholic newspaper, saying we don't want Christian roots, Islam, we need to interbreed, and Jesus was like ISIS, sending out his flocks. I mean, this is blasphemy. And what is the technique? I mean, you're an expert at this. I really respect you. What are they trying to do here?
Well, first, there's the technique of suppression. For example, news aggregators like Yahoo or like Facebook or Google will purposely filter the news so that you don't ever get, for example, any news stories about people using concealed weapons to protect themselves and their families.
That's right.
You just never get it. There are thousands of those that happen each month, and we never hear those stories. That's direct suppression. Google, for example, will promote every single or every so-called success of a new medical protocol drug, and they will denigrate any news about this anti-vaccine or that's pro-health or herbal remedies. They will denigrate all of that, and I've tracked it. It's just incredibly pernicious. And so for Glenn Beck to come away and say, oh, these are just honest people because he looked at me in the eye, talking about Mark Zuckerberg. And when you look at Breitbart's cataloging the 10 areas in which